Sex, porn, love addiction is all about self-soothing to manage your emotions. It got set up back in the childhood development years. It's just not about sex. It's not about porn. It's all about the repeated use has set up the physiology to crave those dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, self-manufactured drugs in the body. It's impacting women, men, children aged 10 to 75 across all the age ranges, the sexes, the cultures, the professions. It increased exponentially during COVID lockdown and impacting so many lives. The Kairos Center has created the first online comprehensive sex, porn, love addiction. It's a video on demand recovery program which you can access from anywhere in the world and begin to see identifiable changes just within 6 weeks of beginning this weekly program. Kairos means your appointed time. Isn't it your time to reclaim your life? Bring color back to life without shame. Click the link below and begin your journey. You owe it to yourself and to others.
But as I'm going to mention later, I'll mention it right now quickly. Things are a little bit changing because of the situation. There's an interesting and probably important fact that we should all know that research has turned up, that with females, the younger that a female experiences arousal, sexual arousal, the earlier, the more of a higher, I guess you say, socio-sexuality index she's going to have. And in case you're not familiar with socio-sexuality, it's the kind of the amount of casual sex tolerance that you have, or promiscuity, we would put it. So higher promiscuity with the younger, and also just openness to all sexual things, basically. So I'm afraid that, and that research, by the way, was done about 2006. I'm afraid that a lot of our girls these days are being exposed. The average exposure here in the U.S. is about, age 10 to age 13. And by the way, that's, again, kind of coming right up to the puberty time period, or in the puberty time period. So it's a bad combination. I think we're getting more young females that are finding themselves enmeshed in pornography than we ever had before. And it's because of the exposures, I think, that they're getting at young ages that are unnatural. Most of the things we're talking about here are unnatural, goes against our sexual nature, basically, that are, putting us into these situations where we have many more, maybe future female porn addictions than we would have had in the past, if that makes sense. Desire for casual sex on the male's part, and many males, although not all of them, many males wanting multiple partners if they're available. Girls and women should know that right off the bat. But to put it another way, a men's bonding response is more complex than women's. Then what I mean by that is that the chemical process is more complex. Men have a chemical in great degree, more than the women do, called vasopressin. And for a man to bond, most men to bond at least, vasopressin has to be in the brain long enough in order to create receptors and then lock. Now, what we're talking about here is men need vasopressin, dopamine, and testosterone in order to bond. And in your typical hookup situation, there's plenty of testosterone going on there. Your typical casual early sex, early sex compared to the beginning of the relationship. And when a young man has that situation where he's having sex with one girl, maybe on the first date, and then maybe 2 nights later he has another girl that he's having sex with right off the bat, vasopressin, which is the bonding chemical for males, never is kept in the brain long enough to create these receptors. So what needs to happen, and again, this is biblical, and it's also, old school tradition, the dating, the courtship, the chaste, people get mad at me sometimes for using that word, but chaste relationship between the young man and young woman, the situation where he's opening the door for her, and they're going to movies, they're going to dinners, they're doing all these things where they're around each other. He's extremely attracted to her, but they're not going to bed. They're not having sex. That's what happens, that's what's needed romance is required, I guess you'd say, by most young men in order to fall in love, to bond, okay? Because the vasopressin then, if this is a vasopressin receptor a million times bigger than it actually is, the vasopressin in his brain, because he's been around her, they haven't had sex, he hasn't had an orgasm, which the chemicals from the orgasm, your serotonin, your oxytocin, your opioids, wash the vasopressin out. Again, the way we've been made, I think there's a purpose there. Anyway, the vasopressin isn't in his brain long enough to create these receptors, and then the molecule bonding actually with it, docking with it, and for him to create that first bond and kind of get territorial about her, because that's what vasopressin does. One of the things it does. Now, when the vasopressin does that, when it happens, then that secondary bonding takes place. So it's a two-stage situations with the males. Oxytocin, which he has as well, but which is antagonistic to testosterone. And if the testosterone levels are too high, the oxytocin bonding can't take place. When he bonds vasopressin wise, the testosterone drops. In fact, every time a male commits on any level, his testosterone drops. So girlfriend, boyfriend, engagement, marriage, and then it drops a lot when they have children, if they handle the children, if they're holding the children, that type of thing. So once the vasopressin lock takes place, then his oxytocin can swing into action. So he bonds again doubly there. And that's when you have a properly bonded male with a female.